Hello and welcome to episode 549 of the official EstablishTheRun.com podcast. My name is Adam Levitan. As always, joined by Evan Silva, and the NFL draft is exactly 7 days away. We've covered the prospects. We've covered the rumors. We'll get to the landing spots and the fantasy outlooks after the draft. But for now, my biggest focus, Evan's biggest focus over the next 7 days is actually betting the draft. For that, we have, in my humble opinion, the planet's most formidable draft bettor. Back at it again. This guy teaches America's youth mathematics during the day and grinds his cock on draft props during recess. It is Anthony Amico. How you doing, buddy?
Doing good, man. You're pretty far removed from the school scene that you think we have recess in high school, but respect.
There's no recess in high school?
No, dude, come on.
Dude. Yeah, there's definitely not recess.
So when are you grinding your cock on props, like lunch break and stuff like that?
Yeah, I mean, like, get your prep period, then we got, all afternoon, all night. We got time.
Prep period. Perfect. All right. Evan, how's it going today?
It's going great. This show was very lucrative last year, and I expect it to be again this year. I know we each came up with a long shot. I got a couple nice long shots. First position drafted. Let's get into it.
Yeah. Hopefully you listened to our show that we did, the three of us, from April 5th, a little over 2 weeks ago. Obviously, and as expected, a lot has changed since then. As we've talked about, the earlier in the process you are, I think the more you want to be leaning into longer shots. That's what we tried to do on the first show. That's kind of where my betting portfolio has gone into longer shots. Now that we're closer and there's allegedly, or what we think is more certainty, I think you can start eating some more chalk. So anyways, on today's show, we will be discussing draft betting with all information that we now have, which is significantly more. Before we get into it, reminder to check out the pod Evan and I did with Lance Zierlein on Tuesday. Really, really informative. Really, really good. Love talking to Lance. Also, reminder, hit the subscribe button on iTunes or YouTube, wherever you're listening / watching this. It's totally free. Helps out a ton. Finally, reminder that this show is sponsored by our friends at Underdog Fantasy. Expecting Best Ball Mania 4 to launch soon after the NFL draft. I don't know what they have planned. It was $2 million to first last year, and Best Ball only seems to be getting bigger. So I assume it's going to be absolutely absurd. Promo code ETR at UnderdogFantasy.com for $100 matching sign-up bonus. That's promo code ETR at UnderdogFantasy.com. All right, boys. Since we last talked, CJ Stroud has gone from a contender to the number one pick to getting absolutely iced. Bryce Young is anywhere from minus 1,200 to minus 1,400 to be the number one overall pick. I'll start with you, Evan, on Bryce Young versus CJ Stroud. Are you surprised that the Bryce team has gotten out this far? And do you think all this CJ Stroud stuff that we're hearing right now, off-field stuff, on-field issues, he could go outside the top 10? I mean, people are saying crazy things at this point about CJ Stroud. How much do you think of that is smoke? How much do you think of that is true?
I think it's real because, that's kind of what I've been hearing for a while at this point. Weeks ago, I think it became clear that Bryce Young was going to be the pick. CJ Stroud apparently has not interviewed that well. He scored poorly. Apparently, I don't have firm information here. I'm just relaying what, Brady Quinn said and some other people have said. He didn't do well on the S2 score. In terms of processing information, that's a huge thing at the quarterback position. And I think Mike Renner talked about, his pocket presence is just not nearly on Bryce Young's level. So to me, I would say it's not surprising, but I still think that there's an outside chance that CJ Stroud, because of the position that he plays and because he has ample upside, could be the number 2 overall pick. Now, Amico came out with a mock, very interesting, very detailed and thorough. It was an excellent article. Amico came out with his penultimate mock today, and he had CJ Stroud plummeting to 11. Now, I don't know, are you trying to match team and player there for the most part, or are you projecting him to fall to 11?
I could see him going a little higher. I think at some point the thirst could get to someone where they make a move up, but I have a really difficult time believing that he's going to be a top 5 pick right now. I think that's really the bigger takeaway.
Yeah, and this odds to go number 2 market, Will Anderson's currently the favorite on DraftKings, at least at plus 150. Tyree Wilson plus 230. Will Levis plus 250, Stroud plus 275. I don't think there's any value there among those four guys unless you have some really firm information. I don't think anyone knows what the Texans are going to do at number 2 overall, whether that's take a defensive player, take a quarterback, trade out. Amico, how are you handling betting the number 2 spot? And also, how are you handling betting CJ Stroud?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the best way to bet number 2 is just to be going under on Will Levis. I know he's been juiced a lot at 6.5. I think a couple of places are as low as 4.5. But I think that the best way really to play this is, I made a decent case in my mock for Will Levis. I think that, Houston is ultimately going to take a quarterback. But I think like just taking his under gives you a little wiggle room because it sounds like, the big rumor now is that he's the Colts top guy. So I think he's probably going to go at 2, but like, I don't think that you need to bet it. Like it's already down to like 2-1 or something for him to go 2. Like, I don't think the juice is worth the squeeze. I'd rather just bet the under. And I think it has a lot more security on it.
Evan, the people are losing their minds. The listening to this, their ears are bleeding. They're saying, Amico, you're telling me Will Levis, who the public hates, is going to go number 2 overall ahead of CJ Stroud, ahead of Anthony Richardson. The line, and by the way, some of these lines are up now on over-unders, which weren't up when we did the podcast 2 weeks ago. Like Levis under 6.5 is minus 300 now. As Amico said, there's some like minus 4.5, minus 160. I mean, there is major juice on Levis to go in the top 5 at this point. People are losing their minds. Evan, how are you handling betting the Stroud and Levis stuff?
I took some CJ Stroud just to be drafted by the Falcons. I think I got it at 22-1. I think it's down to 10-1 now. I think I still like it. And I think that he could go anywhere. It's tough. I'm not buying. Amico has great information, okay, and he's very good with the logic and all that. I do not think that Will Levis is going to go number 2 to the Texans. I do not believe that. It's possible. I don't know. But that's, you have to acknowledge things that you don't know here. And there's just so much uncertainty, I think, after Bryce Young. I am buying that the Colts really like Will Levis. It's possible that the Colts could try to trade up and secure him. I don't know. I'm having a real tough time with the Levis stuff. No question. I really like Amico's angle, though, just to bet the under on his what did you say? It's 6.5?
Yeah, but 6.5 is minus 300 on the under. There's some lower spots that have a little bit better juice. But yeah, Evan, I'm curious just if you think that the Texans stay at 2 or if the Texans end up staying at 2, do you buy that they won't take CJ Stroud? Do you buy that maybe they like Tyree Wilson more than Will Anderson? That's the thing. Even if you think no for certain they're going to stay there, I still don't even know who they're going to take.
Yeah, and Tyree Wilson is coming, man. I mean, he's coming. Like his odds keep moving less and less to be the number 2 overall pick. Lance Zierlein has been beating that drum. I think Jeremiah even alluded to that being a possibility last night on his mock draft show with Pete Schrager. I don't know, man. It's a real tough draft, I think, after number 1.
Okay, let me ask you this on the Levis stuff, Amico. Are you so sure in the Levis stuff that you're willing to lay minus 250 versus Anthony Richardson? And that's the current price in their head-to-head matchup. Will Levis minus 250 versus Anthony Richardson. I think Levis is going to go higher than the general public thinks. I think he will go in the top 6. I'm still not convinced he goes ahead of Anthony Richardson, though, especially to lay minus 250. What do you think about the rest of the quarterbacks shaking out with Anthony Richardson versus Levis, Amico?
Yeah, I mean, that's just a stay away for me. I mean, I think I feel way, way better about the under. Richardson could still be a guy. I mean, Richardson can still go 1, depending on who you listen to. But I think that 3 spot being wide open, if you don't believe that Levis goes 2 and you think he's going to go 4, that 3 spot's still open for business. And if someone really thinks that Richardson is far and away the next best guy, like they could slide into that spot.
I suggested this to you guys in our Slack. I don't think we've talked about it on a podcast yet, but part of me thinks that Bryce Young is going to go number 1 and these other quarterbacks could slide. And Adam Schefter kind of alluded to that being a possibility as well when he said, or he made a bet with Dan Orlovsky that a quarterback is not going to go 2nd or 3rd and then possibly Will Levis at number 4. And that could lead to like a trickle down. CJ Stroud falls a little bit. I mean, Anthony Richardson could definitely fall like into the teens, I think.
Yeah.
I know obviously it's the most important position in all of pro sports. However, these prospects after Bryce Young and even Bryce Young himself, they're very, very flawed.
Yeah. The thing is, everybody always says, oh, wait till next year's class. Wait till Caleb Williams. Wait. Man, if I'm picking in the top 5 and I need a quarterback, I got to go, man. I think it's crazy to pass. So I don't know. Quarterbacks always seem to gain some steam. I'm skeptical. And actually, there was a bet that I wanted to talk to you guys about that's out there in the market. You can bet, will the top 3 picks, all 3 be quarterbacks? So obviously that would assume a Texans trade or take a quarterback, Cardinals trade out. It's plus 270. I kind of think that that's interesting. Maybe not quite long enough for me to bet. Any thoughts there, Amico? First 3 picks, all quarterback, plus 270.
Yeah, actually, as we're recording this, it's up to 3-1. So, okay. I think it's just going to keep getting steam. So I'm kind of good with letting it run a little bit. Mm-hmm. And if it were to get to like maybe plus 350 or plus 400, I think I would bet it. I think that the Cardinals are just like, they are going to be pretty desperate, I think, to move back. And I just don't think it is going to end up being that expensive. I think something that's going to come along with this draft class not being very good is like teams are just going to be like, fine, like give me a 3rd round pick. And I just want to get out of this pick. And I can see that happening in this position.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. Evan, any read on what you think the Cardinals will do? There's a lot of smoke out there. The Cardinals do prefer Tyree to Will Anderson. And I think that's why you've seen those markets kind of flip a little bit, because if 2 goes quarterback, well, then 3, they're going to have their choice. If they stay, they'll have their choice between Will Anderson and Tyree.
Yeah. The Cardinals at 3, I think that they really like Tyree Wilson, but I think they absolutely have to trade out. And I agree, they may take a significant discount in order to do that. They need players, man. Their roster is not very good right now. And their quarterback is coming off a major injury. They need picks.
Oh, they're one of the worst franchises in the league. They're a stone cold mess, are the Cardinals for sure. And obviously the Kyler Murray knee injury doesn't help. Last quarterback thing I wanted to ask about, Amico, over 4.5 quarterbacks in the first round is now out to plus 102. This is obviously just a bet. Effectively, will Hendon Hooker go in round 1 or not? We talked about this a little bit last time. Any update for the people on if you think Hendon Hooker will actually end up going in round 1?
I think it's fairly priced. Daniel Jeremiah did a Q&A yesterday, and he said he thinks that Hooker is greater than 50% to end up in round 1. I can't imagine it's like terribly further than that. So I think it's probably fairly priced.
I think it makes sense for Hendon Hooker to go late in the first round. Obviously Peter Schrager had him going number 11 to the Titans. Mm-hmm. That assumes that, all those other quarterbacks are going to go ahead of him. Although I think Anthony Richardson went behind him in that mock though. But either way, like Hendon Hooker, it's hard to justify taking him anywhere but the first round because he's probably not going to play this year, right? Or at least for the vast majority of the year. If you're getting him on a 4-year deal, you're already burning the first year of his contract, and then you only have 3 years left. And then you got to pay him before the final year if he's any good. It makes sense for a team to trade back into the end of the first round and take him.
Agreed. And I probably wouldn't take the plus 102 there, but anything plus 150 or better is probably a bet for me on over 4.5 quarterbacks in round 1. Evan, of course, is referring to the 5th year option that all first round picks, all teams have on their first round picks. Okay, let's get away from quarterbacks for a second. One of the things that Lance mentioned that I wanted to talk to you guys about with this Dalton Kincaid medical stuff, the tight end market has been absolutely all over the place through this whole process. Started off with Michael Mayer as the favorite, then Dalton Kincaid came as the heavy favorite. Now, since Lance's podcast, which clearly moved the market, now Michael Mayer is back out to a big favorite, minus 175 versus Kincaid. Also, Dalton Kincaid's medical stuff, over 24.5 on Kincaid is now minus 180 on FanDuel. In other words, ton of juice on over 24.5. Do you think it's possible, Amico, that Dalton Kincaid ends up slipping out of the first round?
It's possible, but I don't think it's likely. I think that the medical stuff on Kincaid, he's cleared. This is not like a lingering injury. And I think that, some of the stuff with his weight, all that, I would just attribute that to him not doing stuff because he's been injured. So, ultimately this is going to come down to, I guess, what teams really think of his tape. Jeremiah, I think, still has him as his 9th overall player or something, he's a top 15 guy. So, if you're a team that needs a tight end, he's still the best pass catching tight end in the class. So I think that's someone else.
I don't know about that. Lance suggested that Dalton Kincaid could fall to the second round.
Right.
So this is something that you gotta take into consideration. So there are no workout numbers on Dalton Kincaid, and some teams use like grading systems in order to grade, and they plug it into their spreadsheets. And if they don't have numbers on a guy, he's going to get bumped down. Like teams can become very unwilling to draft guys that they don't have confirmed numbers on. And Lance also mentioned that people at his pro day thought he looked like he weighed like 220 pounds. I think he's a big wild card. I'll say that.
Yeah. Right now, if you want to bet the Kincaid stuff, I'd probably wait, because right now, after the Lance pod, he's just getting really negative steam in the market for sure.
Also, the ETR Discord flipped Mayer and Dalton Kincaid. Like,
correct.
For sure.
So
hammered it.
So two things we bet in the Discord was Mayer over Kincaid at plus money. Evan put that into the Discord. And then we also took over 2.5 tight ends to go in round one at like plus 250, plus 300. That is now down to even money since we bet that. Obviously, it's fluid. I mean, Darnell Washington could end up as a first round pick. Lance seems to think he had a very good shot there. I think that there's other guys who could end up as a first round pick. I know
Sam Laporta is just such a good prospect.
Laporta, Musgrave, and then obviously you have Mayer is almost really likely to be a first round pick. So this bet on DraftKings, Amico, it's kind of gotten away from us a little bit, but 2 minus 450. In other words, over 2 tight ends on DraftKings is minus 450. You're effectively free rolling if you think Mayer and Kincaid are definitely going to go there, and then you win the bet if a third one goes. Now, we took that at a much, much, much better number. It's at the minus 450 now. But yeah, what do you think about total tight ends taken in round one at this point, Amico?
I mean, I'd probably prefer the under, I think, at the current prices. Like, I think we think that this is a pretty wild position. I mean, now we're saying, Evan, you're saying Kincaid could fall out. I don't think Washington is like a lock by any means. Mm-hmm. So 2.5 under at like minus 130 or something like that seems pretty good. Like, that seems way better than you were getting. Right.
I realize this is not a scouting report show, but Amico, can you explain why Sam Laporta is not being considered like a late round one? I mean, let me lay it out for you.
Sure.
He had 2 really big seasons at Iowa, 2 really good ones. He tested really well. The track record of Iowa tight ends is phenomenal. T.J. Hawkinson, Noah Fant, George Kittle. Why is he not being considered as like a guy who could slip into the back end of the first round?
I think he could, but I think it's probably just super thin because he has 3 other guys that are good. And, the Iowa offense didn't do any favors. I think he has like 5 career touchdowns in 4 years or something like that. So I don't know. You read Lance's scouting report on him, and he says that he's not like a fluid ball catcher. Like, he doesn't do well in the contested catch situations. So I don't know. I mean, I think these other guys are just perceived as being way better, that are perceived as being better because they have either better production or, like in the case of Washington, he's just like a freak of nature. Right.
By the way, this Musgrave dude, I don't think it's very live, but 60-1 to be the first tight end off the board is Luke Musgrave. Receivers. So I think I mentioned on a show before, I took under, or maybe I didn't mention, I think I mentioned it in Discord, under 3.5 wide receivers to go in the first round, plus 150. Now it is 115 both ways. Any thoughts on that market? It seems to be that the public's perception of the wide receiver class is that it's not very good, but still a bunch will go in the back half of the first round. I don't know if that's going to be the case. Sounds like JSN, Addison, Flowers are likely to go in the first round. People don't seem to be thinking that anyone else in this class is really worthy of a first round pick. Amico, where do you think about over under 3.5 wide receivers in the first round? Any further thoughts on JSN, Addison types?
Yeah, I think it's appropriately priced right now. I mean, I think Addison and JSN, I would say, are more or less in. And then from there, I think it gets kind of interesting. I mean, if you look at the Bob McGinn stuff, he posts his yearly, he talks to personnel around the league. They have Quentin Johnston as the next receiver over Zay Flowers. And Zay Flowers is someone we bet to be the first receiver of the board. He's gotten some good publicity. So, if you believe that Flowers is a guy that's in, I mean, I think Quentin Johnston also would belong in that conversation. So you have a shot at getting 4. If you believe that the receiver class just isn't very good, then you would probably say, max one of those guys is going to make it. So I think it's I think 3.5 with even juice both ways is probably exactly right.
Yeah, I mean, no one's giving Addison even a chance to go ahead of JSN. JSN is now minus 550 in their head-to-head matchup against Addison. Evan, don't give away your long shot. This is called teasing for the end of the show. Evan's going to give a long shot in the wide receiver market, but any more thoughts here on wide receivers and betting?
And I don't know if I could talk. I mean, I guess I'm going to have to keep it for the end. I think that the wide receiver class is really not good, and therefore I'm willing to take shots on some of the. And I think that none of these receivers. First of all, I really like the over on Jackson Smith and Jigba at 12.5. Yeah. I think he's going to go somewhere 13 or later.
Is that actually still out there? I mean, that was.
It was like even money for a while.
Yeah. And that's why you got to be really fast with this stuff, because that was an outrageous line. I'm sure that line got pounded. JSN is definitely going to go over 12.5.
So I think that, these wide receivers are going to all go like late teens to like 45, somewhere in that range. And they're like, it's hard to differentiate between, especially the top four, Jackson Smith and Jigba, Zay Flowers, Jordan Addison, and Quentin Johnson. Mm-hmm. And what was really interesting from the Bob McGinn article is that, so he polls executives and scouts, and Quentin Johnson got more first place votes to be the number one receiver in the class than did Smith and Jigba. I think Quentin Johnson had 7 first place votes. Smith and Jigba only had 5. I guess we're going to leave the rest for a tease.
Yes.
There we go.
Perfect. Okay. This offensive line market is interesting. We didn't talk about it last time. Evan, maybe you can give the people your thoughts on offensive line market as a whole and who you like for odds to be first offensive lineman off the board.
Yeah, well, I think that the situation is a little bit similar to the wide receivers, that there's just like this bunch of, and the offensive linemen are better than the wide receivers, I think. But there's this bunch: Paris Johnson, Peter Skoronski, Darnell Wright, Broderick Jones. I think that Anton Harrison is a sleeper to get drafted higher than people expect. But there's this bunch of like 4 guys, all projected to go in like from number 9, the Bears. I think that's where it starts, to like 17. That seems to be their range. You look at the odds. I'm going to take the longest shot among those, and that's Broderick Jones, who I think very well could be the Bears pick at 9. Actually, at one point, Greg Gabriel, who I think has some connections with the Bears, predicted that the Bears would take Broderick Jones at number 9. It's just, again, there's this bunch and there's not a whole lot of separation. So let's take the longest shot among them. Broderick Jones, first offensive lineman drafted, 6-1.
Yeah, I don't know if that's the best price. That is the DraftKings price. Evan doesn't mess with Bambi and other sites like that. Amico, you might know better if there's a better Broderick Jones price out there. But yeah, what do you think about the offensive line market? What do you think about the Broderick Jones things? Then there's also how many offensive linemen will go in round 1 market is up.
Yeah, that's what I like right now is the total on the offensive line. It's up to minus 250 at 5.5, the over. But I mean, this is like a prop that hits most years just because the offensive line is so important. And we have 4 locks, the guys that Evan mentioned. You also mentioned Anton Harrison. I think that he is like very close to being a lock. Josh Norris is like super confident about this. I think that Josh knows people. So I tend to believe what he thinks about the matter. So you have 5 tackles that are locked in, and now you just have all these interior linemen, Osiris Torrance.
I think Tippmann could go in the first round.
Right. John Michael Schmitz, Steve Avila. I think that DJ was doing a mock today, or it came out today. I don't know when they did it, with Peter Schrager, and they had the Syracuse tackle Bergeron in the first round. So like there's just like a ton of offensive linemen that are candidates for this, and you only need 1. So I like that.
Yeah. Anton Harrison is minus 430 on FanDuel to be a first round pick. Joe Tippmann is minus 125. Osiris Torrance is minus 125 also to be a first round pick. Okay. I'm still fascinated by this odds to be a second running back market, and I probably should get off it at this point because I think it's probably priced correctly now. Jahmyr Gibbs is minus 330. Charbonnet is plus 330. Devon Achane is 30-1. Spears is 30-1. Roshan Johnson is 50-1. Like they're not giving anyone a chance except for Jahmyr Gibbs and Zach Charbonnet, but now Gibbs is minus 330. I think that's priced pretty appropriately at this point. Amico, do you think there's any movement or anything to see here on odds to be second running back, or any further thoughts on running back? There's a lot of like matching team stuff. We should probably talk about this market, but if you go on DraftKings or even or a bunch of sites actually, like who will the Giants take a running back in the first round, an offensive lineman, a linebacker? You can get some crazy long shots in these markets if you're able to think about team needs and tendencies and all that. I think that's one of the bigger edge markets right now. And so I feel like matching running backs to teams is an interesting way to look at this instead of just straight who will be the second running back drafted. But yeah, Amico, any thoughts there on the Gibbs stuff or any teams you like to take running backs in those markets?
Yeah, Dean Brugler was kind of bullish on Gibbs to Arizona, and that's 16-1, so that's not bad. But I think that the Gibbs stuff, I mean, it's minus 330, I think you said, right?
Yeah.
So like you look at where it was, and the last time we did the show, it was minus 2,000.
Correct.
I would tend to believe that this is more of a value than not. If you look at, again, like the rankings, like we said last time, like he might be 90% to be the next running back off the board. And we're not quite there yet. So I think like up to minus 400, this might be a play if you can stomach the juice. And then the rest of the guys, I mean, I don't think you can really make a bet. So yeah. It's kind of a sit out.
Yeah, I think that this second running back is just wide open. And so I took a shot on Devin A-Chain to be the second running back drafted at 30-1.
Yeah.
He seems to me to be a player that a team could fall in love with. Teams fall in love with like game-breaking speedsters. And he's drawn some Javid Best comparisons, which, Javid Best was the bomb, man. So I think 30-1 Devin A-Chain, because it just seems so wide open to me.
I mean, never forget that Clyde Edwards-Helaire went ahead of Jonathan Taylor in the draft. So like, I mean, these guys can blow it for sure. A-Chain has a very specific skill set. I was reading some things that some scouts said A-Chain would actually be better in the NFL as a wide receiver than a running back. And so, there's certainly like some skill fits there. Certainly interesting for fantasy, no doubt. There's these conference markets up, Amico. How many Big 12 players will go in the first round? How many Big 10 players will go in the first round? I know you took a Big 12 one earlier. I think that line is gone now, but how do you think about these conference markets?
Yeah, usually if I'm looking at the conferences, like I just map it out. Like who are the guys that are locks? Who are the guys that are maybes? Who are probable? I think it's just like any other market. And you probably have to like do a little bit of research on what, like I forget every year, like what teams are in what conference. So I have to look, but, Big 12, if there's any Big 12 at 3.5, I like the over, but at 4.5, I think it's pretty tough to play, which is, I think what it is in most spots right now.
Yeah. Big 10 over 8.5 is minus 265. Over 8.5 players from the Big 10 to be drafted in round 1 is minus 265.
Yeah, and I think that's playable. I mean, maybe I'm just a bull on the Big 10, but I mean, you have 8 guys that I would say are pretty much locked into the first round. You have CJ Stroud, you have Devin Witherspoon, Paris Johnson, Pete Skoronski, JSN, Lucas Van Ness, Joey Porter Jr., and Deonte Banks. That's 8 right there. So you only need one guy from like, I don't know, let's say 21 to the end of the first round to be in the Big 10. And there's plenty of options. I mean, you have Mozzie Smith, you have DeJuan Jones, you have John Michael Schmitz, you have Joe Tippmann, Jack Campbell could get in there. Adebawore, I won't try to pronounce his first name. Like that, there's just a ton of options.
Yeah.
And to only need one guy, I feel like if you just combine all of those probabilities, like you would be well over what minus 250 represents.
Yep. Last thing before we get to these long shots, I'm curious, and I think the people are curious, Amico, what you think about the market this year. We've talked plenty offline. We've talked on the previous podcast about the differences in the market this year. One thing I've noticed is that DraftKings is just like not open for business, even for cleanish accounts. Like they're just not taking a lot, even on clean accounts, where in the past, if you had a clean DraftKings account, it was good. Now you're really getting limited. There's other sites, I think, that have reasonable menus. DraftKings has the biggest menu. Other sites have reasonable menus, but are also taking relatively little action. I mean, I don't blame them. This is kind of the way I would play it. Like, let people bet 50 or $100 and then start moving lines really aggressively. Markets are moving so aggressively, though. I feel like there's chances to come back on other sides of stuff. But anyways, I've said a lot there, Amico. Any thoughts on how the market this year differs from previous years?
No, it's way tougher. I mean, they've opened a lot of stuff way later. I think we're still not at full bloom. So
we don't have any good exact order stuff yet, even.
Right.
The trifecta stuff is not up yet. Yes.
The lines are just going to be way sharper when they open because they're opening later. And like you said, they're just not really taking that much. I mean, even Caesars, who, I mean, pretty much takes bets like on everything. They take your bet, but like they move the line instantly. Like it's like they're not taking 2, 3, 4 bets before they move it. They are moving it on like any action.
Right.
So if you're not first, like you're like really missing out.
I think there's some spots, and I think we mentioned some on the show already. There's some spots where it gets like overinflated, you know, like Lance mentions that Dalton Kincaid, you know, might have a medical issue. Next thing you know, over 24.5 is minus 180. Like it takes one Lance Zierlein to say one little thing about Dalton Kincaid's back for the market to get completely blown out. And I think there's some opportunity there for people looking to come back on the other side of stuff if things go too far. All right. Let's get to the long shots. Evan has been dying to give you his long shot play. Evan, I give you the floor.
Yeah, I already mentioned the stuff about McGinn and how Quentin Johnson in his poll of executives / scouts, Quentin Johnson had more first place votes than Jackson Smith and Jigba. I bet Quentin Johnson at 14-1 to be the first wide receiver drafted. It's still available at 10-1. You look at this wide receiver class, you know, it's Smith and Jigba, slot receiver. It's Jordan Addison, Little. It's Zay Flowers, Little. You know, a bunch of small guys. Quentin Johnson is the prototype. You know, he's at least on paper, and I know he's got flaws in his game. And I heard that he is not interviewed particularly well, but he's like an alpha prototype number one. And I think at 10-1, again, in this big cluster of wide receivers, and there's not a ton of separation, I don't think. Quentin Johnson to me is definitely worth a shot at 10-1 to be the first wide receiver drafted. And I think that you can take him at 10-1 to be the first wide receiver drafted and take Jordan Addison at 7-1 to be the first wide receiver drafted. And you've given yourself good odds.
Yeah. Yeah. You're basically betting that the league does not think JSN as a strict slot receiver is worthy of being the first wide receiver. And that's something that I brought up on the last few podcasts. And I still think it's an interesting discussion. Amico, you're a long shot for the people.
Yeah, I think Evan mentioned this earlier, but I'm going with CJ Stroud to be the 8th pick in the draft, 30-1 on DraftKings. I mean, the Falcons need a quarterback. Like it's pretty straightforward to me. I mean, we had the reports earlier in the offseason that they would not trade up for a quarterback, but if one of their top 2 quarterbacks fell to them, that they would consider taking one. And the report did mention Stroud and Bryce Young. So if that report holds, then CJ Stroud is on the board at 8, then maybe they take him and you get it at a very good price.
Very good price. And that's what I'm talking about when you start, like the best way, I think the best markets to look for real long shots right now is matching players to teams, because there is some, I mean, it's so laggy and like, man, there's a lot of real live long shots out there in those markets. I'd encourage people to look through those. Mine is going to be a consultation with the PSM. And what I've done is I've gotten our R&D team at Gender Labs LLC to go ahead and run some of these prospects through the model. And Darnell Washington has broken the PSM, the penis size model. 6'7", 264 pounds, ran a 4.64. Let me repeat that. 6'7", 264, ran a 4.64, 31-inch vertical, 10'2" broad. Unbelievable athletic specimen for Darnell Washington. Can block right away at the NFL level, I think. And so we've heard negative buzz on Michael Mayer. We've heard negative buzz on Dalton Kincaid.
What negative buzz on Michael Mayer have we heard?
Lance said that the NFL is not that into Michael Mayer. Did he not?
Well, we'll see. We'll
see. And so you can get 16-1 plus 1,600 on, I believe it was FanDuel, plus 1,600 for Darnell Washington to be the first tight end off the board. I don't think that it's likely, but I think it's probably closer to 8-9-1 or something like that. And so I'll go ahead and grabbed a 16-1 there on Darnell Washington, first tight end off the board. All right. Tight end market's has me in a pretzel all month. But anyways, that's a story for another day. All right. Appreciate everyone being here. It's been a 4-podcast week. Hopefully you all enjoyed it. We will be back Monday. Myself, I'll be presiding Roger Goodell style over a mock draft between Evan, Ben Standig, and Scott Smith. We did this last year. It was a lot of fun. I'll be putting on my Roger Goodell hat and doing that once again on Monday. Stay tuned for that. For Evan. Oh, you got to follow Amico at Amicsta. I don't know what the heck kind of name that is. The branding department at ETR did not approve that nonsense, but at Amicsta, AMCISTA on Twitter. For Amicsta. For Evan. For producer Luke, I'm Adam. Good luck, everybody.